Good evening, everyone. My name's Alistair, and it's my turn this week for the evening reflection. So I thought I would actually do a reflection on reflections. I've been involved in this ministry, for want of a better word, for a wee while now, and there's a sheet that goes out that gives us the date that we're to submit our reflection from. And I set up kind of a reminder the week before to remind myself, hey, it's now your week to do the reflection. And then I set up another reminder for the weekend before. And invariably it comes round to the Wednesday that it's due, and I get in the evening and it's sitting in my email inbox on my to-do list that I have to do the evening reflection. And I think, how did I get to here again doing it so last minute? And then I think to myself, why do I actually do this? Why do I personally reflect and sign up to the reflection rota? And I hasten to add, there has been an email chain asking if we want to continue it, and I'm sure I'd be more than welcome to step out of the rotation if ever I wanted to. But yeah, I still sign up, and I still think it's a wonderful thing to be part of. And I guess it, for me, at times comes down to obligation. And this sounds terrible, but throughout my life, what I've always done in regards to my faith is set up obligations at times to be involved in something. And every time it comes around, I always in hindsight look back and I'm glad that I had the obligation. I've been involved in youth ministry now for almost 2 decades. And it does create a lot of obligations, whether it's coming up and creating a weekly study or going to a youth event that is on every single week. I am obliged to do that. And it comes around, and in a busy life, I kind of feel I don't want to, or I feel rushed. I've got to prepare this study for this Sunday morning coming up. But what it invariably does every single time is it obliges me to spend time in the Word or spend time with fellow believers. And as much as I might go into it grumbling or mumbling about how busy I am, because there's an obligation there, I am blessed through it. And it's just a fantastic way for me to, I guess, stay engaged in my faith when otherwise I would be doing something else. And I would fill up my time if I didn't have to do this thing related to my faith. Paul, in one of his letters, in the first letter to the Corinthians, he writes, this is 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 16. Yet preaching the good news is not something I can boast about. I am compelled by God to do it. How terrible for me if I didn't preach the good news. Now, I'm not pretending at all to be a preacher like Paul, but what fascinates me is Paul himself says he's compelled by God to do it. He's not saying that he feels in the zone every time he's doing it, that he doesn't have other things going on in his life or other things that might take him away from preaching the word. But he's saying he's compelled by God to do it. He's obliged by God. He's required to do it. But then he goes on straight away and says, how terrible for me if I didn't preach the good news. In other words, he recognises that although he's compelled to do it, he is richly blessed through his doing of that. Goes on to say, if I were doing this on my own initiative, I would deserve payment. But I have no choice, for God has given me this sacred trust. What then is my pay? It is the opportunity to preach the good news without charging anyone. That's why I never demand my rights when I preach the good news. Paul again recognises that he doesn't have a choice in the matter. There's an obligation there on him to preach the word. He was a skilled man when it came to preaching. And as a believer, God wanted to use that gift of Paul's. So Paul felt that need, that obligation to do that. Yet what did his pay? It's the opportunity to preach. It's the recognition of all the blessings and the benefits that brings into his life. And that's something I would encourage you in, that if you struggle maybe to read the Bible regularly or to engage in your faith, it's maybe actually do a bit of what I've done. Create yourself an obligation. Once it's there, you can't get out of it. And trust me, you will be richly blessed by God for the time that you've spent fulfilling that obligation. And yeah, that's just something that has struck me quite recently. Why is it I set up all these things for me to do when I'm so busy? Because it forces me to have and accept that blessing, to sit down, to have a think, to reflect. Why is it I reflect? It's to spend that time in the presence of my Creator and Saviour.